again, folks. Thrive While Loving an Addict. I'm Kale Wells, your host for today, and we have joining us Dr. Wanda Kay. She comes with, everybody comes with a great story. This is a different kind of story, I think, that will give you a window into, what she's been through. But what I love about her story is the realizations that took place for her, and then how she grabbed a hold of her situation and did the deep dive in terms of learning all the things that she's gathered. And so we're going to dive in. And kind of where I'd like to start today is I recently heard, which I thought was a brilliant way to frame things, is that our life's purpose sits right beside the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And that just totally resonated with me. And it feels like that might be true about your story.
Absolutely. I think that whether you come at it from a religious perspective or you come at it from more of that empirical scientific perspective, I think that the best way to get through anything is to find gratitude and find the thread of silver hope that's woven in that tragedy. So I think that no matter how you come at that, whether from a religious perspective or an agnostic or atheist perspective, I think it can be the best way to move through that is to see, okay, what am I going to gain from this? Where's my lesson to learn and how can I move on?
Okay, so let's start with what you needed to learn lessons from your origin story.
Well, as with everybody, there's layers and layers, but we're going to focus primarily on my life starting with a marriage that I had a great deal of hope for. Now, before that, which is a episode in and of itself, came from parents who were similar. I would really call it a very small cult. They were Christian fundamentalist homeschoolers. And so they tended to be people who were much more capable of cutting people off. Why that's important to my story as we look at addiction is how that made me an ideal target for people who are addicts. Because if you can cut people off from a support system or from a resource, that is ideal. It also happened that I met him as a freshman in college. He was already out of college, but he was in the college band. So he had graduated, but since he was still, he played tuba at the St. Thomas College Band, and I was a freshman saxophone player. I assumed he was a college student. So even the beginning started out with at best we could call it a confusion, and at worst we could call it a bit of a deceptive intentional ruse. So either way, and as we go through this, I want to be clear that while I certainly have deep feelings of betrayal about it, I also can see it as a clinician that he is somebody who had his own wounds that caused these addictive personalities. So I don't want to in any way make people see this as this dichotomous, I'm the good guy, he's the bad guy. I don't think that's helpful for anyone, including people who are in the midst of this now.
Right. Well, I'm kind of a big believer in we come together with people that we choose in intimate relationships to work our shit out. And so it takes both sides and both parties, and then we have a lot of choices.
Esther Perel, I think, says it best when she says we all have one relationship through our life until we learn our lesson. It's just with different people. And I very much think that is true. And I see it all the time in my own clinical work. So
Yeah.
I would agree. So let's start with I met him as a freshman in college. He was in the band and I fell really hard for him. He was an intellectual. He was very much a theologian. His background was a philosophy major at St. Thomas, which is a very Catholic institution up in Minnesota. A theologian. He had talked about wanting to be a priest. He had talked about wanting to be a theology professor. And we had really intensive academic cognitive connections, which you would not generally think that an 18-year-old girl is looking for, but that is me. I am a super nerd. I love those kinds of conversations. So that was my Achilles heel. If you want to talk intellectual to me, that does it every time. So it was a perfect match. I will say to this day, I find him to be a very intelligent person in many, many ways, certainly in his ability to understand logic and book learning. Now, how does that play out in terms of life choices? Those are two different things. Those are very different things.
Right.
But I fell madly in love with him. I thought he was the cat's meow. And at the same time, my parents were becoming more and more aggressive in their views of the world is this bad place and we want to pull you out. So I had finished my first year of college and they really were like, I think we need to bring you back home. We would like you to not get a college degree. We would like to pick your husband for you. And more of a very, very conservative. They ended up being more Mennonite than anything else. We'd gone to many churches throughout my life, but they kind of landed in the Mennonite church, which tends to be similar Amish, Amish parallel almost. And it was a farm. So I grew up on a farm that it was in South Dakota. Those are large farms. We were probably, I don't know, 15 minutes away from the closest neighbor in a car driving down the gravel road. So this was not you opened your door and you saw three, neighbors down the street. This was real isolation. I could go an entire summer without seeing other people besides my family. So I was used to that kind of isolation. I wanted very much to be out of that isolation. Going to the city was euphoric for me, and I loved it. And I loved this idea of all this potential and opportunities, and the idea that that would be taken away potentially was horrifying to me. So while I had fallen in love with him, my parents were also kind of putting the gas pedal on in terms of saying, if you don't stay home with us, we're just forcing it. So I was like, I am in this trap. And he definitely knew that. Now, consciously, was it some sort of conspiracy on his part? I doubt it. But what I'm certain of is he did want to be the knight in shining armor. That's always a wonderful place to be for most of us, right? But dysfunctional. And he also liked the idea that I would be an island that he could collect in that way. I didn't come with a whole network of protective measures and resources. So that's kind of the way we started. He immediately, we got married in August of 94, which, if you recall, for those young audience listeners, August of 94 was when we were really just starting to get a taste of the internet. A few homes were starting to have, or most people were assuming that a lot of homes would have internet, but not everybody did. And it was dial-up internet.
I remember.
This will come into play in just a moment, because I really think that internet piece is key in not only his addiction, but in the direction that our marriage took. So we, as I'd mentioned, he wanted to be a theologian. We moved to the University of Dallas. So we moved from Minnesota down to Dallas. And there he started a couple classes. He was feeling for, I'm going to probably get that doctorate of theology. I love that idea. Again, remember, I'm a lifelong learner. I wanted to be a professor. And of course, I was idealizing this beautiful life of two professors studying late at night and talking deep thoughts. So this was great for me. The University of Dallas also has a Rome program, and we had gotten a position on the campus at University of Dallas, and we're up for a potential move to the Rome campus. And how awesome would that have been to have started our family in Rome, surrounded by the birthplace of Western culture, talking about philosophy. And my background was English at that time. Everything just was falling into place. And I got pregnant, which was totally fine. We'd been married about a year. I got married very young at 20. I was pregnant by the time I was 21, and I had our first child by the time I was 22. Things were perfect until I came home, and I came home early from a night class because I was I was finishing up my undergraduate and starting my master's class. I came through the back door into my daughter's nursery. She was probably, I don't know, 2 weeks old.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and in the nursery, we also had our computer. So this nursery, we were broke college students, right? We didn't have anything. His parents had helped us get this little 2-bedroom apartment, and it wasn't great shape at all. But I had gone to Joann Fabrics and I made this beautiful kind of bassinet set, and I'd matched curtains that I'd made. I loved the nursery that I'd made. And when I opened the door, he had, and it's kind of funny now to think of it, but he had 3/4 of a screen rolled down of a pornographic picture and his pants down in her nursery. To a young mom, especially a young mom from the culture that I'd come from, it was horrifying. Because all of the things that come to mind are, oh my goodness, what is this? He's in my daughter's nursery. Is this some sort of potential incest? Is this some sort of child situation? What is happening? How could he do this? There is just a flood of feelings.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. And again, I was cut off from my family. So most people would call their mom or their dad. I didn't have that. So I picked up my baby and I walked out. And I just walked. And he followed me and he begged me for forgiveness. I came back. He was on his knees crying and begging for forgiveness. And never happen again, never happen again. And I was like, well, what is the alternative? Do I believe this person? I love this person. I've given my life to this person. He's the father of my child. What is my alternative? And I didn't have another place to go.
Right.
So that was the first really, really big betrayal. Prior to that, there had been one instance, and again, this is where that internet comes in. I had opened, when I was pregnant with her, I had opened up the computer when he was at work, and up popped AOL. Now, do you remember AOL chat rooms?
Oh, yes.
Yes. So again, this is going to age me and some of your listeners, but AOL chat rooms popped up. I wasn't even aware of AOL chat rooms at the time. And he had been, what we didn't even have a name for it back then. He was sexting with another man, he was pretending to be a woman with this other man. And I was just so completely confused. Now, again, for your younger listeners, this maybe it would not be nearly as confusing because this has been something that's talked about much more openly. Gender fluidity is much more. This was not the case in 1994. It was a different era. I was just completely confused by the whole thing. That time he was not nearly as dismissive or he was not nearly as apologetic. He was much more dismissive. And he said, you are worried about nothing. That's what every man does. Every man does this. Now, as a clinician, I know that is definitely not true. This is a unique subset. That doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it not a normed behavior. And so for him to claim that was, again, a bit of that gaslighting. And that's when you start to see the beginning of that screw to turn of you're crazy, not me. This confusion is intentional. It is really by design. And I'm going to now enter in the clinical view that I have, and it's backed up by research, that narcissists and addicts often go hand in hand. Now, narcissist, if you want to go by the true clinical definition, it's 1% to 6% of the population. But things are on a spectrum. And when you start to see these habits or character traits, you're going to start to see addicts really pulling from that toolbox that is the narcissist collection. Now, not every narcissist uses that. Not every narcissist has all those tools, and not every person that pulls those tools from that is a narcissist. But you're
Mm-hmm.
going to start to see the act begin to take from that narcissist toolbox and begin to compile more and more of those. And they need to keep people off balance to keep their secret safe.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing that is very eye-opening now.
Well, what I was thinking was, number one, obviously you were perfect. I mean, in terms of the whole isolation thing. And so at what point, because if I remember correctly, this went on for a number of years. So at
Yes.
what point did you reach out to somebody?
I did not reach out for years. So I was married to him for 20 years. I had 4 children. There were ups and downs throughout
Okay.
there. And every time that gaslighting became more and more me being the crazy one, him
Right.
being the rational one, he would even tell the children that. He'd be like, your mom is just kind of crazy. She'll probably get through this at some point, when I would be crying uncontrollably. And I was, to be honest, losing my mind because
Mm-hmm.
I did not know how to get a handle on it. So at year 19, my 16-year-old daughter, that same one that he had been
Mm-hmm.
masturbating in her nursery,
Mm-hmm.
came to me and said, "Mom, I think Dad's having an affair." And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Honey, your dad would never do that to us. He's a good man. He's just going through some things." She was right. He was
Mm-hmm.
having an affair. And
Mm-hmm.
it was not his first affair. He had, throughout that marriage, done many things that we'll talk about in just a minute here. But within, I would say, 2 months of that conversation with my daughter, he had been becoming more and more cruel to me. He was not mean in the beginning. There were moments of meanness, but that meanness began to spiral and become worse and worse slowly, almost like a frog boiling in a pot. So you
Mm-hmm.
barely noticed it
Mm-hmm.
until I was just sad all the time when I was around him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then thinking, well, maybe if I changed, I could fix something.
Right.
And this is a great time for me to talk about one of the things that he described, actually, in terms of what it's like for an addict. And I talk about this with my clients as well. If
Mm-hmm.
you think of a clock face, if the event, whether that is the drug abuse or the binge drinking, or in his case, a problematic sexual event, using a prostitute or looking at illegal porn,
Mm-hmm.
if that happens at midnight, what happens between the first quarter hour, so between 12 and 3,
Mm-hmm.
is the addict feels horrible. They have a lot of self-loathing. Oh my gosh, I
Mm-hmm.
did something horrible. I did it again. I can't control myself. And then if you think about the partner going on the outside of that clock, that partner on the outside of that clock doesn't know what has happened necessarily. Now, if it's a chemical addiction, maybe it's a
Mm.
little more obvious.
Right.
But if it's gambling or addiction of deception, like sex addiction,
Mm-hmm.
they can hide that usually pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of drug users can too.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hiding that. I don't know that the event has happened as the partner. I just see the person that I love is hurting
Mm-hmm.
and is just really depressed and really down. And I want to do everything I can to help that person out, help that person
Mm-hmm.
feel better. What happens right around the 3 o'clock mark is that addict's feeling about self-reflecting on the behavior becomes, you know, this isn't my fault. This is because of that partner that
Mm-hmm.
I did this.
Mm-hmm.
And they become angry.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the partner on the outside has no clue
No
what has
idea what's
changed,
going on. Right.
but that addict is angry at that external partner and is
Mm-hmm.
saying, that is the problem. That is why of course I'm drinking. Of course I'm having sex with somebody else. The partner feels, oh my gosh, they're mad at me. What did I do that clearly I must have done something. You can't just not like somebody for no reason, but I'm racking my brain. I can't think of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens at the 6 o'clock mark, the half hour mark, is the addict starts to think, not only am I justified in this, I'm going to start planning for the next event. And for the third quarter hour from 6 to 9, the
Mm.
addict starts to plan for how are they going to get the needles? Where are they going to get the alcohol? How are they going to set up the next pornographic event or the next prostitution meeting or
Mm-hmm.
the next affair? And that partner on the outside no longer is a part of their thought process. And
Mm-hmm.
so the addict is no longer angry, but they're completely disengaged.
Right.
And so the person who felt badly for their partner without any kind of rationale for why their partner was so sad now and then was angry by their partner was angry at them for no particular reason. Now they have their partner disengaged, which I guess is better than the alternative of just being hated, but so
Mm-hmm.
confusing. And then the
Yeah.
last quarter hour after the event has been planned, the addict is euphoric in anticipation of the event. And
Mm-hmm.
the partner on the outside is like, goodness, oh, it must have been just a thing. How
Mm-hmm.
happy they are. They
Mm-hmm.
seem delighted. They seem
Mm.
engaged with life, not necessarily with me, but with life. This is good. I must have been imagining everything.
Mm-hmm.
Then the event happened and the cycle happens again. Now, this cycle can happen over the course of a day or the course
Right.
of years.
Mm-hmm.
It varies. And I do think it really is true. I think it's a truthful thing.
Yeah. And so was the realization that he was having an affair, was that the pattern interrupt for you?
He finally admitted to me because I had finally said, I can't sleep next to you because I feel hate leaking out of your very pores. I can
Wow.
feel the hatred. I don't know what I can do better. And not to
Mm-hmm.
toot my own horn, but I am kind of an awesome wife. I love to do awesome. I just love to do things. I love
Good
to
for you.
nurture people. I
Mm-hmm.
love to do domestic things.
Mm-hmm.
And I also love to have my job and I love to be a mom. I'm a pretty happy person most of the time and pretty self-sufficient. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't know what to do. I've racked my brain. I know that I'm doing more than a lot of our neighbors are doing in my
Mm-hmm.
role, and their husbands seem okay, and you just seem miserable and hate for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sleep downstairs in our unfinished basement of our McMansion,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just going to go from there. You tell me when you stop hating me, or what, or tell me when you have thought of what I can do to make you less miserable with me. And
Mm-hmm.
within, I think, a day and a half, he came down and he said, I'm having an affair.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole lot more that I'm not ready to tell you.
Mm.
And so for the next year, he held that over my head. And that was while I was finishing up my PhD. So I was writing my
Oh.
dissertation alone in that basement,
Mm-hmm.
which was honestly a saving grace because it was so distracting. I had a product that I had to work on. It had
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with us, and it was
Mm-hmm.
a saving grace. And by
Mm-hmm.
the time, and I also knew I did not want to go through the complete disruption of a divorce while I was finishing up a dissertation,
Mm-hmm.
getting ready for my orals and writtens and completing that.
Sure.
So I was like, I'm just going to hold on with white
Mm-hmm.
knuckles and get through this. And by
Mm-hmm.
the time I finished up the dissertation, I want to say it was right before that he took me into his counselor's office and he laid out an entire lifetime of sexual behaviors that definitely would be called deviant
Mm-hmm.
sexual behaviors long before he even met me, and how that continued on not only through adolescent but then throughout our entire marriage. He had not been faithful to me a single year, not one
Mm-hmm.
single year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from the outside, to this day, I am a little amazed that people could even believe the story. We are not going to be the textbook example of what an addiction family looks like, we both had great jobs. We both were well educated. We didn't fight. We went to church. We had 4 kids. We were not partiers. None of those things applied. We lived in a rural town. He traveled for work, which is where most of his spikes and events went. So he would go to prostitution events when he would go on work conferences to Atlanta or Vegas or all the different places. But again, great job, loving relationship for the most part, but
Yeah.
completely dysfunctional.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for people to understand because there are definitely misnomers or misunderstandings about what addiction looks like and how it presents itself. And quite honestly, at this day and age, if you don't hold the belief that you have no idea what's going on in somebody's life, you should be, because you have no
Agreed.
idea what's happening behind people's doors. The people that you meet every single day, you have no idea what's going on in their lives. You may think you do, but I work with enough people in the executive space that I see it all the time. So,
Exactly.
hmm
Well, and I think it's tough because the people that tend, and this is a broad brush, this is not always true,
hmm
but people who
hmm
tend to be with addicts who are in a strong Venn diagram with people who have narcissistic tendencies,
hmm
um, they tend to be codependents, the
hmm
partners do. And
hmm
codependents, yes, there's a lot of dysfunctional tendencies, but codependents love crazy. They just love strongly. That doesn't mean they're loving well or healthily
hmm
or functionally,
hmm
but
hmm
they love really intensely. And there's some really beautiful things. Again, think about these as toolboxes. So if
hmm
you were the model codependent, you would have this whole bag full of your codependent tools.
hmm
And then there's people who are borrowing from that little
hmm
pile. That doesn't mean that you're a full-blown codependent, just like
hmm
the narcissist isn't a full-blown narcissist. But
hmm
you think about these tools that are somewhat neutral, and then you start to use them. And the more you use them dysfunctionally, the more you become the person who owns the entire toolbox. So
hmm
I loved my husband, addict, and I'm sure many people who are listening are in that same spot. They love the
hmm
addict. I
hmm
still loved him when I left him. I
hmm
loved him for years, honestly. But
hmm
loving someone does not mean you have to drown with them.
Oh,
In fact,
hallelujah.
yeah. And
hmm
you cannot love someone into recovery. And I
hmm
would argue that he probably isn't. The numbers on sexual addiction recovery are not good.
Right.
Not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
And
not like,
so, yeah. So you
go
can't
ahead.
love anybody into recovery. You can
No,
love them with boundaries while they're doing their thing. And then at some point, it is absolutely up to them to choose whether they're going to live a different life or not.
it's tough because they often think that they want that,
hmm
but the person that is in control of them
hmm
does not want that.
hmm hmm
You can, again, think about this from a religious perspective, or you can think about it from a clinical perspective. What came before psychology was religion. So I think that there are a lot of parallels that are helpful to, depending on who you are as an audience.
hmm
There are different forces within us, or if you want to think about it from a schizophrenic, not that everybody's schizophrenic at all, but there are
Right.
different
hmm
pieces of us that have more say in our actions.
hmm
His addiction person had a lot of say in his actions, and I would argue still does.
Yeah. For me, it was very clear to me that my son Sam, in particular, there was the addict part of him, and then there was the Sam part. And I could discern between the two because they were very different. And
Mm.
somebody said to me once, they were talking about a child of theirs, and they said, well, my wife can't trust them. And I said, well, here's what you can trust: they will lie to you. It's just part of being in addiction is they will lie because the
Absolutely.
addiction is in desperation. to continue to do the addiction because they think if they don't, they will die. And if you can wrap your head around that and understand that desperation and that in our brains, this is how I think about it. The addiction has taken number one position as far as survival is concerned, then it is incredible from my perspective that people hit recovery because they're overriding that belief, that system, that wiring to begin to take their life back. And then how long does it take them, to rewire so the addiction part of them isn't in charge anymore?
And that's, we're kind of surfing along these different terms that are so common in our current pop psych world. But when we talk about a narcissist, what do most people think about narcissism? They think about a person who puts themselves first always. That's why an addict is essentially a narcissist, because whatever they're addicted to forces them to put themselves first.
Right.
They cannot live a self-sacrificial life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So take us through this realization. You get a divorce. There's obviously kids involved for sure. That's a whole other conversation that I think would be fascinating. But you step into, were you doing your dissertation, your PhD in something related to this?
No, I was getting a PhD in policy with a focus in education, adult education. So, in the end, I have a ton of degrees and I loved that work. And it was looking at a lot of gender tendencies because the dissertation was about why women don't stay within engineering. So it was not the same thing at all. But it was looking at gender differences and how genders view career and relationship and domestic responsibilities differently. So in some ways there was some overlap, but it definitely was not along the same path. And I do think, again, had there not been internet, I don't think my marriage would have ended because I don't think he would have had. It's almost like having a liquor closet open to you at all times if you're an alcoholic, and liquor just falling out of your pockets at any time. He, as a sex addict, before you had to go to a seedy part of town to get your fix, and he probably wouldn't have done that because for him to get to the point that he was jonesing so bad for that, he needed more regular access, which of course the internet gave him. So yeah, I don't think that it would have happened had that not been the case. And I also think that my getting a PhD was very scary for him because I was slipping away from his grasp. He did
Right.
not want me to finish any of my graduate degrees. He wasn't even that thrilled about me finishing up my undergraduate degree. And it became a real thorn. That's what I thought was one of the big issues with our relationship, was that I seemed to have this addiction to higher education. Now, in retrospect, I'm like, oh,
Oh.
he did not want to let go of that control. He wanted me to not have any other alternative. Well, once I had a PhD, I had access to tenure position. I had access to a lot of opportunities that wouldn't have been there had I not done any of those things. Now, if any of your listeners are in a position where they haven't gotten that education, know that it is never too late. You can always get that. There is always hope. There's always a way. You don't have to be as far along as I was and still have that opportunity for escape.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's really important for people to recognize the things that you have kind of touched on that are the isolators. It is really important for us to kind of wake up to behaviors that tend to isolate us and cut us off from our friends or our family if, they're part of our support system. They will just slowly cut you off from your entire support system. And so that's really important for people to be paying attention to. And so you get your PhD. At that point, are you divorced?
I finished my PhD and divorced at the same time.
Okay. Okay. And then what was the journey for you on the other side of this marriage?
Oh, it was brutal because Again, people, I don't think people realize the change in culture around sexuality in particular in the 90s versus the 2000s versus the teens versus now the 20s. It has been giant, massive differences. So the culture that I grew up in and was married in had a very different view of all of this. I'm curious as to how I would have reacted having been exposed to all of the things that most adolescents are now exposed to. It wouldn't have been as startling to me. So that was just getting over the jolting of that. I could not have imagined ever in my wildest dreams that my very Catholic husband, who always went to Mass, we said the rosary, we went to holy days, we were part of a church group, we did Bible studies, was seeing prostitutes throughout all of my pregnancies. So he had been exposing me to all kinds of problems throughout all of my pregnancies and kept that hidden. He started having panic attacks, and I was like, it must be worried about, the extra kids. No, I think he was having panic attacks because he felt so much self-loathing, which is typical of an addict. So the biggest piece I think I had to heal from was, yes, the betrayal of the man that I loved and had committed my life to. Yeah, that's awful. But a bigger betrayal is I didn't see it. I was there for 20 years. I was literally sleeping next to the enemy who lied to me every single day. Clearly, I am an idiot. Clearly, I can't trust myself. Clearly, I don't know what I'm talking about anything. All of the value that I put myself in was my brain, and my brain had betrayed me.
Betrayed you.
But, 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 I've gone into somatic therapy. I do a lot of somatic therapy. I will tell you in retrospect, and I want your listeners to really listen closely to this. My body did not lie. My brain shut my body down, but my body did not lie. I got sick. If you go back and track all the times that I got, and I'm a very healthy person, the doctors thought I had stomach cancer or colon cancer because I would have horrible stomach aches for no reason. Horrible stomach aches. They were like, something's got to be wrong with your GI. I had endoscopies. I had all kinds of colonoscopies. I had everything. Nothing was wrong with me. My body was saying, hey, lady, something's going on here. You need to get out. You need to save yourself. We're in trouble. We're under threat. And my brain was telling my body the same thing it told my daughter, which is, what are you talking about? There's nothing to see here. Move along. So to your audience, the body will be very honest when your brain shuts it down.
Yes, absolutely. So that reminds me of when I was married to my ex. It was in the last year, I think. I started to have really severe pains in my coccyx area, and so upshot, go to the doctor. Then we do a test. And I remember sitting there with the doctor just before we did the test, and I said to him, "Could this be psychosomatic?" And as soon as I actually said it out loud, I went, "It is." I did the test, didn't show anything, but I knew that basically Steve was the pain in my ass. And so that realization was like light bulbs, just going off. And so I'm totally resonate with you saying your body will clue you in here. You need to give it the reverence that it deserves from that perspective.
Absolutely. The other thing that I have learned in my path, and just so your audience knows, what research tends to indicate is that it takes us at least half the length of the relationship, if not 3/4 the length of the relationship, to get to a healing place. So I was married to my husband for 20 years. I should expect a minimum of 10 years and a maximum-ish of 15. And I don't think that we should penalize ourselves for taking longer to heal. That can happen. And you can heal in various states. I have since I've been married now to to a man for a couple years who I had been with through the majority of this post-divorce time. I can tell you that I don't think that I was fully healed when I was originally with him. I don't think that necessarily the textbook way of don't get into any relationship until you're healed is feasible or even recommendable. What I would encourage you to think about is to think about the toolbox. Again, think about the tool bag and think about how you can borrow from that. So, as a codependent, I was pulling from a codependence tool bag. There's some great tools in there. I'm not going to give up some of those tools, like to love fiercely, to have a great deal of loyalty, to really want to see the best in people. Those are not bad things. They can be used dysfunctionally, but those are not bad things. Likewise, I know from him, he had a lot of confidence. He had a lot of strategic self-focus. Those are neutral tools. Even detachment can be a very neutral tool. That doesn't mean you can use that you have to use them unethically. You can use them very ethically to protect yourself, to set boundaries, to take up space. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to become kind of this horrible monster, and you can still learn from them. So try not to think in this dichotomous way. That's why it's really important to not think of the addict as the monster bad guy, because then you can no longer take any of their tools without being like, ugh, gross. They've got
Right.
good tools. They're just wielding them poorly.
Yeah. Well, in our side of the equation, how I hear this from you is it's when we overemphasize those particular tools that you just talked about, where it's stealing our life force energy.
Yes.
That's when we have gone over that line. When we can energetically balance ourselves and be light and bright and on authentically who we really are and still love fiercely and still be loyal and still be those things, we still feel good. We don't feel off. We don't feel the energetic, the vampire energy stealing our energy and our life force. And so being able to pay attention to that is really helpful.
It is. I think a lot of people, especially coming out of a relationship with an addict or narcissist, either one, I think it's helpful to get guidance to
Mm-hmm.
learn that balance because I don't think, and this is what I see a lot of times happening in counseling circles, is that codependents are really encouraged, or people who have been in a relationship with an addict are really encouraged to be all about the me, all about the self. I don't think that's the solution. I think the
Mm-hmm.
happiest people we know are people who live self-sacrificing life,
Mm-hmm.
but a healthy self-sacrificing life. And how do
Mm-hmm.
you find that? It's a difficult razor's edge to walk, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't want people to go too much into the me, because that becomes very lonely and isolating too. It's kind of the other side of being a codependent.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. I think for me, it's been a lifelong process and will probably be
Yeah.
for the rest of my life. Is
Yes.
figuring out how do I energetically balance the life that I love and stay, centered and authentic and present and all of those kinds of things while I live a life of service. And for me, living a life of service is it's like breathing air. It's just I want to make sure that I'm breathing air that's actually serving me, so that I can continue to do my life of service.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But if you're not feeling like you've got the balance out there to your listeners, find somebody who can help you with that. And don't
Mm-hmm.
beat yourself up about it. I do think it's a lifelong process, just like you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took me a long time to figure out because I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. It took me a
Mhm.
long time to figure out, like, at first I married my mom, who was the rager. And I was like, okay,
Mhm.
well, that didn't work out, and
Mhm.
it's taken a lifetime to move with an intention that I wanted to continue to perfect this ability to have a healthy relationship. I wasn't going to settle for less, and so for me, that's how it has worked, is to continue to, okay, well, that isn't going to work the way I want it to work. I want a healthy relationship before I leave this planet. And it took a long time.
It does take a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So most of there's a number of people that I've talked to that, have lived, really tough lives, and have done the work that we're talking about doing, and continue to elevate and learn and stretch and grow, and, become that next best version of themselves, so on and so forth. And they're in their 60s and 70s. They're older, wiser, and they have, found that sense of peace, and they have found that healthy relationship. And so there's hope
There's
for
definitely
rewriting the
hope.
story.
Definitely. Definitely. It's one of the reasons why I probably am finishing up my last graduate degree, though I can't make any promises. Why I went into coaching, why I went into somatic therapy, and why I'm finishing up my LPC, and I've started up a business with Catherine Cashman, who is a licensed psychologist, or has been for 40 years, to give people the feeling of hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hopeless at all.
No, not at all. No, there are people out there that have done the work like you and, Catherine, and so many other people. The reason I do this podcast is to give people like you a voice to be able to speak the possibilities of recovery and hope, and that there is a path. There's multiple paths, but I want people to have an example of, people who have stepped into what I would consider the thriving zone. And, there's an intentionality that goes with that. So, before we wrap this up, I really do want you to speak to, what are the things that you do for you, and that can include your community, so on and so forth, that keep you in the thriving zone, of where you are in your life right now.
Well, not surprisingly to you, I do a lot of reading, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of reading. I do a lot
Mm-hmm.
of research. That just comes naturally to me, and I probably couldn't stop it if I tried.
Mm-hmm.
I also am very fortunate that I get to surround myself by really good people.
Mm-hmm.
And I also I'm a strong believer in, no matter what the subject is, you really learn something if you teach it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, being in the role of coach and clinician,
Mm-hmm.
I get to teach it a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll be saying something to one of my clients and I'll be like, oh my goodness, why am I not thinking that myself?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the more you can kind of start to be around people who are in those spots on either side and listening to them and start to find patterns and see repeat patterns in yourself, the more
Mm-hmm.
you'll continue to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a faith life that means quite a bit to me, and that's been important. I don't think you necessarily need to have that, but I
Mm-hmm.
do think that one of the great powers of religion, doesn't matter if it's Christian, Buddhism, Hinduism, Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
Protestantism, we as humans have this unique understanding, both of logic, where it's very plotting, A to B to C. And I love logic. I'm not against
Mm-hmm.
that. I think that is the kind of gold standard for doing research.
Mm-hmm.
Longitudinal, double blind placebo studies. Very logical. I love that. But we also have this beautiful ability to have intuition. We know
Yes.
we have intuition, and it's this amazing shortcut to conclusions that you maybe can't explain.
Mm-hmm.
Religion gives our little science brain or our little Western brain a reason to say, you know what? You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know how you got from here to there. The fact is, this is true. You can feel it in your gut, you can
Mm-hmm.
feel it in your heart. It's just true. And so I think that the more that you can lean into that side of yourself, call it
Mm-hmm.
your spiritual self, call it your intuition, I don't care what you call it, it's going to make you a much healthier, happier person.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. I'm very wedded to paying attention to, my knowing, and I've kind of, in some respects, done my life that way. And from the outside, I know that people thought that doesn't make any sense. But I just was like, I know that this is the next right step. And so, yes, paying attention to your intuition, whether it comes from a voice or a knowing or however that shows up for you, I do believe it is our spirit's way of connecting with us in this human form. And the wisdom that comes with that is sometimes you like, whoa, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how might they reach out to you and connect with you? And
Yeah.
mhm,
I have a somatic healing and a coaching business called
mhm.
Holisticated, like educated and holistic, only blended,
I love that.
Holisticated Health. So go
Hmm.
to holisticatedhealth.com. You can set up a discovery call with me. I also have regular retreats, even though I'm in Minnesota. We have regular retreats where it isn't miserable half the year in Florida at a retreat house,
Hmm.
where we do, it's what we built called the NEAR program, Narcissistic Emotional Abuse Recovery. We have a lot of women who come that are healing from addicts because yes, they're not exactly the same, but that Venn diagram is very much the same. So that abuse recovery looks very similar. If
Hmm.
you're recovering from being in an abusive relationship, it's a 4-day intensive. We
Great.
come in, we heal, and we leave on Sunday or we leave on Monday after a Sunday ceremony feeling lifted, and that remains a community. Community is huge, especially being
Hmm.
around other people who are going through it. So you
Hmm.
can give me a call at 612-447-9310 or come to holisticatedhealth.com and we can talk to you about whatever your issues are.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a great conversation, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. We all could use a little healing. And
We
this
all
is
can.
courageous work. And so I just want to say how grateful I am for you having the courage, and it feels very much like, you just divinely guided in this direction of doing healing work in the world. And this is what is changing people's lives and the world.
Let's change lots of lives.
Hmm. I'm with you. Yeah. So everybody, thank you for being with us today, and remember, thrive.